What is the most important invention? Is it controlling fire? Is it the wheel? These two are the most important inventions. But humans have created something that might be more important than this, but nobody ever talks about it. Money. Even though money is a very important invention, but you really can't compare it to controlling fire and the wheel, because money is a fallacy. Everybody knows before there was money, people would trade with one another. You would give something valuable and then take something valuable. But there was always a problem, like someone had a herd of sheep and wanted some vegetables. He had to give up one sheep for how much vegetable? Who would be able to decide how much that is? All we're trying to say is that the system back then was not fair. Someone had a lot of corn, but they needed sandals. But maybe the guy that had shoes didn't want any corn. So what we're trying to say is that the system was always lacking, and that means the person that had corn couldn't get sandals, or vice versa. The guy that had sandals had no ways of getting corn. So now we're slowly realizing how important money is and how easier it makes our lives. Money has a very long history. First of all, slowly things that had value turned into a form of currency. Like in an area, salt was very valuable. In another place, beer is very valuable. And when these things are very valuable, people start working towards getting more of these. So that's kind of a currency itself. They could use the beer or salt to buy different things. And if you saw our video about salt, we said this was the first form of taxation in China. Everybody knows this. When there are things that are plentiful, the value of them is not much. But when you have something rare, the value goes up. Money is the same thing. If there's too much of it, it has no value. Basically, inflation. Just like salt that was the first form of taxation in China, the first metal coins were introduced in ancient China as well. The first currency that actually had value and there was an empire behind it was ancient Chinese coin around 770 BC. These coins were made from bronze, and it was the first time that there was an actual stable currency in an area. The thing is, it wasn't easy to get. You couldn't just go to a salt land, take a bunch of salt, and become rich. The kings of different empires back then didn't understand the idea of this because they knew it could be counterfeited. But that's until we get to 600 BC. Elidas, king of Lydia, introduced the first ever coin that had the stamp of the empire on it, and nobody can copy it anymore. Also, the metal used was made from a mixture of gold and silver, so it was actually expensive to do so. This was the first time that there was different value in different coins, and it was all based on the symbol on the coin itself. 56 years after this took place, Cyrus the Great, king of Persia, attacks Crassus, king of Lydia, and takes over. And he gets familiar with the currency system they were using. And that is why he creates the Achaemenid money, which is called the Daric. Throughout history after this, everybody tried to counterfeit different types of coins. They would use cheaper metal to basically create the replica of these coins and become rich and scam people with it. Even though the punishment was insane, but the people would still risk it because the come up was insane. When we get to the 7th century, the Chinese once again create a revolution in money. In the Tang dynasty, there was a shortage of money, But the empire was very stable, and you could say the people trusted the empire. Since the Tang dynasty had a shortage of money, they basically created IOU certificates, and it had the empire's stamp on it. It wrote on the piece of paper, this paper is worth this much in this empire, and you could go out and use it for that amount. These IOU certificates were given to different workers that worked for the government instead of being paid in silver or gold or other valuable resources. For example, on these pieces of paper it would write, the empire owes you 5 coins with this certificate, and this piece of paper has that much value in this empire, so you could use it instead of 5 coins. This was the first paper currency in the entire world, and after money turned into paper, it became more of a fallacy. Back in the day, there was gold or silver behind these currencies, but now it's really not. The most expensive banknote that has been printed in the whole world is the 10,000 Singapore dollar, which has a value of $7,500. This is just a piece of paper. A piece of paper that's worth $7,500. It only costs 20 cents to print such paper, but you could use this piece of paper to buy gold, to buy a car, or anything you please. We understood the history of money in a way. Back in the day, it was the same thing as today. The more money you have, the easier your life is, and the more wealthy you are. And if you have an insane amount of money, the more power you have. Kinda like rich families like the Rothschild or George Soros. So the governments that print money have the maximum power, right? Like for example, the US government wants to buy F-35s from Lockheed Martin, and they realize that each of these fighters costs $150 million. So they tell the printing press to continue on printing so we can pay for these planes. They very easily print the money and hand it over to Lockheed Martin. Is there a problem with this? Yes, a very dangerous problem occurs, something called inflation. A healthy economy means that goods and services equals the amount of cash in the market. When one of these becomes imbalanced, one is higher than the other, that's when you reach problems. When there's too much money, goods and service costs goes higher and higher, causing inflation. And the opposite, when there's too much goods and services, the value of the money goes up and deflation happens. A lot of governments lack money like this. Like the government of Iran has one of the biggest inflations in the world because they continue printing money and inflating the market. Inflation in the United States was extremely rare until recently in 2020 when COVID showed up. The most amount of money printed in the history of the United States happened in the last 2 years. And for a country like the US where inflation wasn't really understandable and nobody really felt it compared to other countries, you really feel it now because everything got much more expensive. 40% of the US dollar produced in its entire history was printed in the last 2 years. When there is inflation in the US, it causes the entire world to have inflation. That's how big the US dollar is. The Federal Reserve is an extremely powerful part of the US government, and they don't ask permission to do anything. They can print new money. They can change whatever they want without asking for permission. They say inflation started in 2020 in the US, and it's gonna continue to the year 2030. And that's at a rate of about 2% per year. 2% is acceptable for the world, but for the US dollar is pretty bad. However, all of this we're saying is showing you how much of an illusion money is. It feels like a never-ending game. A lot of economists say that saving money in your savings accounts is not a good idea anymore because the return on investment is not good whatsoever. But when you buy assets with all this money, you don't lose the game. You just stay in the game a little longer. This is something that everybody in the world now understands. Robert Kiyosaki has a very interesting quote about money. He says money is not the goal. Money has no value. The value comes from the dreams money helps achieve. Let us know what you guys think about that.